Morbidly Yours is a cute and inspirational rom-com set in the lush country of Ireland. Before I jump into the review, I'm just going to quickly comment on how bright the pink looks in this. I'm not sure what happened, I think something went wrong with my camera, but either way, enjoy the colour pop and the beautiful sprayed pink edges of this book. This book is about an American woman called Lark, who's trying to escape her past back in Texas, and the way she's gone about this is to completely up sticks and move to Ireland, more specifically Galway, which is a small town on the western coast of Ireland. While she's settling in, she meets her new neighbour called Callum, who's a cute but shy undertaker and lives in the building next door to hers. As you can see from the cover, he's described as being pretty tall and lanky with a quite traditional sense of style, whereas she's petite and has a more, let's say, flamboyant style. For instance, her love of cowboy boots makes her stick out quite a bit, but I couldn't work out if that's because not many people wear cowboy boots in Galway, or if she just has a very out there sense of style. Near the beginning of the book, there's a page of translations, and that's because in Galway, it has the highest proportion of Irish speakers in the whole country. Over 50% of the population speak Irish. There's also an additional page of translations at the back of the book, with words of a more spicy nature. As an English language book, I really love how the author included these Irish words and phrases, and also purposely included characters with Irish names. Although it's such a small gesture, I think it adds a layer of realism, and I think it gives the characters an Irish authenticity. I also want to mention how even in English, the author included some very specifically Irish slang. Special mention to having a puss on and watching hookers. Another area where I thought this book excelled was the comedy. Some of the one-liners and some of the awkward situations made for some pretty funny reading. As well as the lightheartedness, this book also tackled some pretty heavy topics, such as social anxiety and bereavement. As I mentioned before, Callum's pretty shy, and he also has a stammer which he's had since he was a kid. He also got bullied for it when he was at school. As a result, he's got a little social anxiety when it comes to introducing himself and talking to strangers. Meanwhile, Lark is a widow, and whilst I wouldn't say she's still mourning the loss of her husband, I would say that she's still mentally trying to deal with the repercussions of this loss. Because of these backstories, it makes these characters perfectly suited to one another. Lark is very outgoing and bubbly, but is also incredibly understanding and patient towards Callum's social anxiety. In order to inherit the funeral home which he currently lives and works in, Callum must find a wife before his 35th birthday, which is in a few months' time. Lark, being a good friend, offers encouragement and advice for the various dates Callum finds himself going on. Meanwhile, Lark avoids death and graveyards because they bring back too many bad memories, and she's sworn to herself that she'll never fall in love again to stop history from repeating itself. Through Callum's work as an undertaker, she sees how compassionate he deals with death every single day, and she begins to realise that when someone dies, it doesn't have to be the be-all and end-all. The kicker is, whilst these two are going through their respective development arcs, they're secretly developing feelings for one another, but both of them are too scared to admit it because they don't want to ruin the great friendship they currently have. Whilst I did enjoy the transition from friends to lovers, this does bring me on to one of my least favourite points about this book, and that's the pacing. It was a little bit too slow burn for my liking. There are a lot of scenes where things are happening, but they don't actually add to the story too much, so I'd describe them more as filler scenes. There's a delicate balance between including these scenes where we get to see different sides to the characters, but also not bloating the story too much with them, and unfortunately I feel like some of them could have been edited out. On a similar note, I felt there were too many pages dedicated to Lark's subplot, where she faces a challenging environment at work. Initially I did like these scenes because they added a layer of realism, however towards the end they did feel a bit repetitive. Because of these pacing issues, I did struggle in the last third of this book trying to reach the end, and I did find myself just skim reading at some points. What I will say is though, at no point did I consider putting this book down and giving up, because I really did want to see how things ended for these characters. And I think that's testament to say that I was invested in the story and I was enjoying it. I think it's the uniqueness of the premise that made me want to see this to the end. Firstly, because this book is set in Ireland as opposed to the UK or the US, it's a refreshing take on the rom-com genre. As well as the language used, I really enjoyed seeing Ireland through Lark's eyes and reading the beautiful descriptions of the beautiful landscapes. Secondly, there's an overtone of death throughout the whole book, but it doesn't make it dark in any way. If anything, I'd say it makes it more realistic. Lark's aversion to death must surely be relatable to some readers. And thirdly, these characters just felt so imperfect, but in the best possible way. As we see them develop throughout the book, it sends an inspirational message that as long as you believe in something, you can do it. So all in all, I would recommend this book, especially if you love slow burn, small town romances. However, just be aware that some parts are a little overwritten, and also some readers may want to check trigger warnings.